Have you ever experienced a plot twist in real life? This reminds me of my funny funeral story. So you know how, when you are at a funeral you see a bunch of people who you sort of know? At my grandma's funeral there was this guy signing in, and I knew him, but couldn't remember from where. I turned to my brother and asked him where we know that guy from. He's never seen him before, but I know I recognize him. I suppose for background information I should mention that I do outsource it for small to medium sized businesses and see tons of people all over the place. My clients range all over the place from construction to gambling to the local Planned Parenthood and a software development company. So I tend to see a bunch of people that I vaguely recognize. Usually I assume it's from my horse track client. Anyways, back to the funeral. About halfway through the service, we are Catholic, so it's full mass plus funeral, about 90 minutes long. One of the deacons stands up to do a reading. Turns out it's my grandma's favorite deacon. The second he opens his mouth I realize he's one of the head protesters at Planned Parenthood. I'm 2 pews back and right in front of him, and I just bust out laughing. Luckily I was able to stifle it and make it look like I was crying, helped by the fact that I was laughing so hard I was crying. Unfortunately I never did see him again at Planned Parenthood. I always wanted to tell him about how much his reading meant to me. It was a beautiful reading, and then walk into the abortion clinic. Yep. Eater. To help with the confusion, K is my female, bisexual friend. Jen was her bisexual girlfriend. Andre is K's boyfriend. Brian is Jen's boyfriend. New friend, K, is dating a woman named Jen. Jen is super weird, clingy, demanding, always accusing K of being shady, etc. Even accused K of being in a relationship with me, also female. One day, I asked K, so tell me how you met Jen. K and Jen met on a study abroad trip. Jen was romantically interested in K, but K wasn't really reciprocating. Jen was totally cool with it, and they became good friends. In fact, during the trip, Jen introduced K via email to her cousin, Andre, male. Andre and K totally hit it off and start an online relationship complete with exchanging pics, etc. Andre sends K gifts when she returns home, including expensive jewelry. Andre also hooks up Jen with his friend Brian. Everyone is happy. Until one day Jen finds out from a mutual friend that Andre and Brian are dead. They ran off together in a gay love affair and ended up overdosing on drugs just weeks before Andre was supposed to come meet K in person for the first time. In their shared grief, K and Jen started a relationship together. Wow, quite the faking story. In fact, I decided sounds faking insane and start doing some digging. I find the picture of Andre that he sent her in a random Google search. I look for any stories of this torrid gay love affair gone awry in a hotel drug binge. Nada. All sorts of weird shit. So I say to K, have you ever thought that maybe Andre doesn't exist? She is, remarkably, interested and not upset. We go to Andre's old email account. We get in using Jen's password. Yes, they shared passwords because Jen didn't trust K. K loses her sheet. Jen had created Andre and the whole story, complete with fake pictures, paying a male cousin of hers to have phone conversations with K, getting nude pictures, etc etc. During the Andre relationship, K's mother died unexpectedly, and Andre paid for all of K's expenses to make it home for the services, etc. And it was Jen the whole time. This was a long bullshit too. Over a year of this sheet. So K emailed Jen from the grave of dead Andre's account, forced her to confess, after which Jen threatened to kill herself. So K called the police who took her to the hospital, and then K got a restraining order and they never saw each other again. Bonus detail, Jen even had someone, may have been Jen herself, call K pretending to be Andre's aunt, to tell her how sorry she was, that he had died, and that he loved her etc etc. Also supposedly during this drug binge Andre and Brian cut each other's testicles with plastic forks. Helluva drug. K is married to a real person. I've met him and has a daughter now. This incident was several years ago. I was engaged to be married to a guy when I was only 20. Broke things off at 22 and met my now husband, and within 3 months we got pregnant and married. Fast forward 13 years. Husband is in construction and we have become very good friends with his foreman and his wife. We have kids the age, share some interests, it's pretty good, except the wife is more than a little unhinged. She is high strung. She has weird self-esteem issues despite being very pretty. She is really fascinated by everything I do. She constantly asks tons of questions about my ideas on parenting, macup, movies, housewifery, such, etc. Then, she starts copying things we do. I tell her about a fight my hubby and I have. Her and he have the same sort of fight right in front of us. My sons are long-haired little skater dudes, so her son grows his hair out. I go to see The Lord of the Rings. They are suddenly really into low TR. She reads the books I love, tattoos things I admire onto her skin, starts to mimic my mannerisms, even flirts a little too much with my husband, and it starts to bother me. I try to bring it up politely, but she blows up. We don't talk for months. One day, my husband comes home from work and says he heard our friend's marriage was splitting up. I was curious, so I sent her a supportive email thinly disguising my curiosity. She calls the next day. We talk. It takes her a while, but she eventually admits to infidelity, but starts apologizing to me for betraying our friendship by sleeping with the man I loved. I hung up in fury and drove straight to my husband's work and accused him. He was astonished. Then he was pissed and tried to deny it. Together we crossed the job site and started in on the poor husband of this woman. The man is horrified that his wife told me what had happened. I scream at my husband and start to run away in hysterics. The foreman stops me because he doesn't understand why I'm angry at my husband. After all, my husband didn't introduce his wife to my old fiancé. Yep, she had become so obsessed with me that she tracked down my ex-fiancé and seduced him. And she thought I would give a single fuck about it. Now I hear she is all cracked out, living in the high desert with a different guy that I also went to high school with. Weirdo. Edit. Pronouns. Forgot some words. Clarified some stuffs. I used to know a guy named Ben. Ben was the biggest two-faced douche I'd ever known. He once met a girl online and went out to meet her and returned a few days later. When asked about her, to his female friends, he said that there was no spark, no chemistry, whatever. To his guy friends he would say that she was so ugly he couldn't stand to look at her. Ben hated ugly women. Ben and I lived together briefly, and my overweight girlfriend, later wife and now ex-wife, stayed with us frequently. She was friendly with him, would hang out with him while I was at work and frequently drive him around if he needed. As soon as she was gone, though, he would laugh about how fat she was. Ben hated fat women. Years and years pass. I'm on a Cupid one day and I see a new member. She looks vaguely familiar. I look at her photos and it hits me. Ben, who was already unattractive, gained a bunch of weight and became transgendered. In essence, he became a fat ugly woman, the very thing he hated the most. The end. Or is it? Transgendered Ben briefly dated a lesbian friend of mine who lives with my ex-wife and would come hang out not knowing he was in the house of the woman he would only a few years before make fun of for being fat. His relationship with the lesbian didn't last, needless to say. Not a huge plot twist, but I did find this occurrence that happened a friend rather amusing. My friend who lives on campus near me had 5 other roommates, each with their own rooms of course. One of the roommates was a Chinese guy who for a while had been acting strangely. He alternated between being really friendly and towards being cold and unsure. He'd never open his door completely when people knocked and would sometimes forget things that he'd said when referenced later. His English skill would fluctuate wildly and he would sometimes change his clothes oddly halfway through the day. He would also usually spend all his time inside his room. He'd also make himself a rather large amount of meals throughout the day. After 6 months of this strange behavior, but largely not worth asking about, one day my friend came back from a class, opened the door which was next to the kitchen, looked to the side into the kitchen, and there were 2 of the odd acting roommates staring back at her, deer in the headlights style. Turns out he'd been hiding his twin brother in his room since he'd arrived and thought that the roommates would report him to the university if they found out, so they took it, in turns leaving the room or watching if the coast was clear before they both came out, alternated cooking meals one at a time etc. I was pretty stoked to open an email from a secret admirer in my senior year of high school. Every day for almost 2 weeks I'd receive a new note listing what she thought were my better qualities, how she was too shy to admit her feelings to me in person, and she'd finally reveal herself at the big dance coming up that Friday. The emails became more and more forthcoming as the end of the week approached, and finally culminated with a clue about how to figure out who she was. These are the only species besides humans that have sex for pleasure. I totally thought I was getting laid with a clue like that. I was a heavier set lineman on the football team and kind of a class clown, which meant despite my lack of confidence I was always in with the popular crowd. So, as we pre-drank for the dance, I told a few of my friends to be on the lookout for something dolphin related. Word spread quickly, and by the time we arrived I had a huge group trying to help me solve the mystery. A teammate of mine found out as the night went on that Adrienne, this cute girl I sat next to in social class, had a temporary dolphin tattoo on her left shoulder. After some prodding by my friends I went over to her and the group of girls she was with. A slow song started as I sheepishly asked for a dance. With the entire school watching my 2-week-long mystery reach its climax, she leaned in close and whispered in my ear, "You're an asshole sometimes," promptly followed with a slap across the face. I'd never felt that level of confusion/embarrassment. She'd orchestrated the whole thing because she didn't like my class clown demeanor in social class. I still hate dolphins. I was in this really contentious child custody dispute with my wife's ex and his wife over my stepson. Stepson has always had behavior issues at school. They've never been reliable or supportive. And then after they suffered a house fire and lost their daughters, things got worse and worse. After a visit to their home that nearly ended in my stepson being interrogated by CPS, we decided it was no longer safe to send him over there. We ended up in court with me representing my wife at the hearing. I basically accused her ex of being violent, negligent, and dangerous, and his wife of being mentally ill, obsessed with molestation, and a danger to the child. I accused her of spitting in stepson's food, framing him for molesting her baby, and essentially murdering her babies by causing the fire and profiting off their deaths. The judge must have thought we had some good points, because we stayed out of jail, but not enough to keep my kid away from his father and stepmom. We finally agreed to allow him to move in with his father permanently because the situation was too disruptive to our family. So stepson moves in with dad and stepmom, and everything works out fine. He does well in school, makes friends, joins the band. Really started to question my own paranoia and whether it was all in my head. Maybe I didn't trust stepmom just because she didn't like me. Maybe I needed to cut back on the law and order. Then, less than 6 months after that the move, stepson gets sick enough to go to the doctor for antibiotics. He's home alone with stepmom with a 103-degree fever, but she still makes him do chores. When he doesn't do them to her liking, she withholds medicine, both his prescribed antibiotics and Tylenol. Then she tries to give him a double dose of Adderall. When dad comes home, stepson's fever is 104. Dad goes crazy and yells at her. Stepmom calls the police and accuses dad of threatening her. Dad goes to jail for 7 days, losing his job and PhD, which he was months away from. Stepmom files for divorce. Since then, dad told us that stepmom really did spit in stepson's food and he knew about it. She was violently raped by a family member 4 years as a child without any prosecution, and he showed us the medical records showing that she tried to get stepson framed for molesting her baby. At the first divorce hearing, she accused stepson, dad, and grandpa of molesting her babies. So, yeah, I guess I know crazy when I smell it. Edit, clarity. About 10 years ago in college, a girl who I was friends with in high school said she wanted to take the train up to my college to visit me for a weekend. She got off the train, we went straight to the bar and drank 2 pitchers of natural ice. We were both hammered and stumbled back to my dorm room. I was passing out in the bed and she came out of the bathroom in just her underwear. It was strange considering we had been friends for so long, but I just assumed it was because she was wasted. Then, out of nowhere, she hops in my bed, rips my pants off, and starts giving me a blowjob. It was a huge what the fuck moment, but who's going to protest in that situation? After a little bit of that I rip her underwear off, and she says, "Do you think we should And I was like yes we should. So we start banging, and I literally last about 30 seconds. I think I was just extremely caught off guard by the whole thing. It was freaking embarrassing. We both just pass out. The next morning we wake up, and she tells me she's hopping on the next train to go back to school. It was awkward. So we lose contact after that episode, and I run into her in our hometown at a party about 3 years later. She's there with all her friends, and I'm thinking how they're all probably laughing at me because she told them the story. After a while of just avoiding each other at the party, she finally comes up to me, and we awkwardly chat about nothing. Finally she says to me, "Things got weird after I came to visit you." I was like, yeah, about that. And before I could get another word out she says, "I just have to ask you one thing. Why did you stop?" I was confused by the question at first but quickly realized that she didn't even know I had finished. I replied, "Well, I just thought it was going to be bad for our friendship." I guess I was right. Biggest bullet dodge of my life. This is probably all down to how incredibly oblivious I'm most of the time. I was 20 at the time. I frequented a graphic design forum. This was early 2000s, when fora were still the most common form of community on the internet. The kind of small-scale community where you actually feel like you know the people behind some usernames. Anyway, at some point I mentioned that the congress I was attending in some big city had a huge 6-hour gap between events, and I was bored in City X, which was immediately replied to by another user with the same problem at the same congress. We end up agreeing to meet in town to visit some of the musea while we while away the time. Turns out she's a nice looking Asian woman my age. We hang out making chit chat, pass the time, and get back to work at the end of the day. It's a several days long congress, so we end up doing the same thing several times. Pretty much all practically work related. Musea, small galleries, exhibitions. I like art, but considering the line of work I'm in, it mostly felt like work research. On the last day she mentioned something in passing that completely stumps me. When I divorced 20 years ago, apparently she's not my age, but 17 years older. Asian people, go figure. We had a good laugh about that, and I mentally had another good laugh, because obviously the thought of asking her out had crossed my mind before. With dating off the table, I didn't think anything of it when she needed to pick up some stuff from her hotel room. We got into her room, and in the space of 30 minutes I got my first proper kiss. First blowjob, had the sentence "I want you inside of me." I had no idea people actually said that, and lost my virginity. I was so unprepared that I asked her what she was doing while she had her tongue in my mouth. I remember lying there looking at the ceiling afterwards, trying to put the last 30 minutes in order while thinking, what the hell just happened? All well for 18 years in my case. Pretty normal and cozy childhood. From 14 and up I smoke a lot of weed, take some mushrooms, and live a fast-paced hardcore life of street violence, drugs, vandalism and the likes. It is spring, 5 o'clock in the morning. I'm baked out of my mind in the back of the night bus on my way home. I'm thinking I will change my ways, I will live, I will be kind. The coming summer shall be my first of my new life. A few months later I smoke too much or something. Get a panic attack and damages to my nerve system from the drugs. Pretend like nothing has happened. Every day is a horrible experience. Live with that sheet. While my life spirals downhill for years and years, I begin smoking weed again. Even though it gives me hours of panic attacks, I lose all my friends, cut contact with my family, barricade myself in a student dorm where I'm living. But I have not paid my rent for a few months, and eviction notice starts coming in. A friend I haven't seen or spoken to in a few years texts me and asks if I want to come to a New Year's party in my old hometown a long way from where I live. I agree to come. It's a long way, and I'm just faked up from anxiety, stress and have to get off the train several times because of panic attacks. At this time I had not smoked weed for about a year, and still I'm just getting worse and worse. No help, no social contact, no friends, no family. Oh well. Somehow I actually get there. I blow off going to see my parents first. I'm thinking I could maybe get drunk. Sometimes that helps. Not this time. I have to exit the party several times, have to cut off conversations with people. Everything feels wrong and strange. I'm faked up. And not in that good way. On the inside I'm a screaming chaos of anxiety and depression. We all go to a public rooftop to see the New Year's fireworks. This is in Europe. A girl that I have vaguely known far out in my circle of friends asks if I want a New Year's kiss. At this point I have not had a relationship with a girl since before I was 18. And at this point in my story I'm 29. And the relationships I have had have crashed bad or been so weird it has hurt me bad mentally. I kiss her while the fireworks explodes all around us and we are surrounded by chaos and drunk people. We start to talk and over the next few weeks, even though my social phobia tries to blow her off, we meet a few times, kiss and hook up. Before this I had been homeless, living on couches here and there for a few days at a time, and basically just been as faked up as you can be. Without being hospitalized I cannot count the number of times I have run out of the places I was living certain that I was about to die, and being afraid no one would find. I cannot remember any part of my life from 18 to 29 where I felt joy or happiness. I'm now 34, I'm still with that girl that kissed me. I'm almost done in my treatment for depression / anxiety / call it what you like. In my arms is my 1-year-old son sleeping as I'm writing this. Well, on one of my arms, and in my lap to be precise. I start taking classes to get a degree in computer science in 2013, although the level of math I have to pass first will be hard. That's it. My original plan was to write 2 sentences. I will now go lay my son on the couch. He is a little sick with a cold, and either bedroom is in the other end of the apartment, play a little PS3, and go to bed soon, to get up early tomorrow, and go to my parents' house for Christmas. That was my take on real life plot twists. Take care you good people. Merry Christmas. In high school I get my first girlfriend. I was 15, and she was 14. Things go pretty good. We get together pretty quickly. Soon after we start dating we lose our virginity to each other. It turns out, 8 months into the relationship, that she has a best friend who has a huge crush on her, and she has a huge crush on him. She decides to break up with me to be with him for a while. Being in the same school I got to see her every day, and we would still make out constantly. Apparently her best friend was okay with having an open relationship. After a week or two, she starts to get really quiet and nervous around me. It turns out the best friend was abusing her. She came one day with bruises on her neck, where he was holding her while he raped her. This goes on for a while. I give her all the support I can, as I was still in love with her, and try to get back together. Finally she breaks up with the dude, and comes back with me. From that point on the relationship went pretty much downhill. She got colder and colder as I grew tired of being emotionally manipulated to stay with her. We finally break up. After breaking up, she is the sweetheart she was at the beginning, and was around me all the time trying to make out with me. For the first weeks I'm okay with it, but slowly she starts getting colder again, so I back off and get out. After a while I see her get so lonely I start getting worried, and try to be her friend. Then she misses school for a week. I call her parents and family and everybody refuses to let me talk to her or to tell me what's going on. Turns out she tried to kill herself and was admitted to a psychiatric hospital. Normal procedure after an attempted suicide. She comes back to school and tells me she was diagnosed with schizophrenia, bipolarity, and borderline. Plot twist. It turns out the best friend was part of her schizophrenia and never really existed. TLDR, never stick your dick in crazy. Okay, so I work in the restaurant business, Burger King to be specific. I was fairly new at the time of this event, so I wasn't surprised when I was accused of what happens next. While bussing a table off, one of my co-workers, let's name him John, one of my better friends at work, came up to me and asked if I had been drinking beer out of the walk-in beer freezer in our basement. Of course, I had denied the idea, as I wouldn't dare do such a thing, especially being fairly new there. John responded with assurance, saying he didn't think it was me, but that he wanted to make sure before my boss approached me on the subject. The next day I worked, my boss did confront me on it, very calmly as he is with everything. He didn't make a point of whether or not I did do it, just that it was both illegal, due to my under 21 status, and theft from his business. I understood fully, and went about my day. Over the course of that day, several other co-workers came up to me asking if I had been doing it, mostly jokingly, saying things like just be more careful next time. Even though I know I didn't do it, it was still a nuisance to be burdened with, because I didn't want to look bad in the eyes of my boss, especially after working damn hard to display my determined work ethic. At the end of the night, I started my bar back closing ritual, in which I even out the ketchups, roll up excess silverware, and refill the upstairs stocks with beer, napkins, fruit, whatever else is missing. The beer and liquor require separate rooms, across from and within eyesight of each other in our large basement. I decided to grab the liquors first, filling up the box with Captain Morgan, Joe's Cuvo, Pinnacle, and the usual bottles that get used up fastest. Upon exiting the room, I looked across into the beer walk-in, the door of which was open. Sitting inside was John, drinking a beer, looking right at me. Just a side note, John is a fantastic guy, don't get the wrong idea. He told me that our boss had wanted him, and several others, to dispose of the lesser drank beers, which remains to be proven. Regardless of truth, he did tell me that our boss would not continue to think it was him, so I chose to stay out of it and let whatever happens happen. To this day, nothing has happened. Sad this might get buried, but here's one of my most memorable plot twists. About 13 years ago, I was 17. Two friends of mine, one male, Chris, one female, Mel, were obviously into each other. I knew that. They didn't. They were both talking to me about one another, but not wanting to get myself involved too much. I kept that to myself. I was being the best friend that I could to both of them, without taking any risks to ruin what I felt could be an awesome upcoming relationship. One day, they both called me an hour apart to vent about one another, because apparently they had a discussion over the phone that didn't go too well. I didn't take any side. I was just a bit sad over the whole thing. Chris invited me to go to the movies to change his mind. I gladly accepted, and we went to see The Phantom Menace, just came out. While we are walking to the theater, Chris talks to me about the situation. Explains that he's really sad about not getting anywhere with Mel. I try to cheer him up, get his mind psyched about the movie. We enter the building, head towards the counter. What do I see? Mel. She's there, seemingly waiting for someone to arrive. She opens her eyes wide with surprise, then disapproving look. What the hell, Sylvester? Chris also turns on me. Dude, that's not cool. Do you think it's a joke? Mel adds, you should not pull things like that, or try to get involved in our business. I'm completely speechless. I'm trying to find the words to explain myself. But, I had no idea you'd be there, I swear. They keep going. Seriously, go fuck yourself, Sylvester. That's just an asshole move. By that point, considering I spent most of the past 2 months trying to be as good a neutral friend as I could, seeing them turning on me, not wanting to listen to me, feeling honestly not believed or trusted, I turn back and say, with tears in my eyes, seriously guys, I'm out of here. I can't deal with that right now, I'm sorry. I didn't take 10 steps before hearing Sylvester, don't go. Hey Sylvester. I stop, turn around with a very emotional and angry what? And then, I see them, arms around each other, with the biggest grin I've ever seen on anyone. My reaction was hard to describe. Such a huge mix of emotions. I ended up hugging them, saying they pulled off the best prank I've ever experienced. I was working at the movie theater when the conversation comes up that a dude with my name used to work there. My manager tells me that we have a lot in common. So we chat over MySpace, and I come off as a little strong, which I realize now, so he just stops talking to me. Fine. At this point I'm 19, and a virgin, which I'd like to point out isn't a bad thing, and awkward around guys, so I shrug it off. Fast forward about 1.5 years. I'm now dating this guy I met through mutual friends, things are going okay. Then his mom tells me about how, names substituted, John always wanted to be like his older brother Jamie, down to growing his hair out to look like him. I don't think anything of it, till we go to Jamie's house. It was the MySpace guy I was flirting with over a year ago. Jump in the TARDIS, and go forward a few months. John broke up with me for being clingy, over text message. Not a glamorous way to be broken up with, but is there really? I get a message from Jamie wanting to hang out. And we do. We then start fooling around. And then we just kind of drop it. One more twist to this story. I promise. It is now 2009. I'm in the height of my party years, and I meet this guy, who is currently in 2012, my boyfriend. He starts telling me stories of his youth. Jamie was his best friend, and up until recently his roommate. And minor twist, turns out this dude worked with my sister at the time all these past events went on and totally wanted to bone her. TLDR, internet fling didn't work out. Started dating guy that was unknowingly was internet guy's brother. Then boned internet guy. Currently dating internet guy's best friend and ex-roommate who wanted to bone sister years prior to our meeting. This happened to my dad, not me. My dad met this woman, let's call her Jessica. Anyway, they meet and she was just kicked out from caring for her elderly mom by her sister, while also caring for and visiting her dad in a nursing home for people with Alzheimer's. So my dad offers her a place to stay for a little while until she's on her feet. Might I add, she's a super sweet and caring woman with a seemingly heart of gold that was maliciously ostracized by her family. Well, they started to hit it off and began to date. We all meet her, and she is instantly liked by all of the family. She tells us about her son, who lives in Virginia. We'll call him John. He was a mechanical engineer who had graduated from Clemson University a few years prior and took a job up there. We are in SC. She even told about how she was married to an abusive husband and left him to move in with her parents to raise him. Everything is going well, and 3 months later, my dad tells us all that he asked her to marry him. We were all shocked, but went with it. If that wasn't strange enough, they wanted to get married ASAP. Again, it was weird, but we went with it. So, they're married in under 2 months from this point. All of a sudden, she tells dad about all this money, and we are talking millions here, that she had made from poker machines before it was outlawed here. Told all about how her friend had went into business together. It didn't seem weird, because she used to own a temp service with this same friend. Also, her dad was in one of the most prestigious and expensive facilities of the area. The pieces all seemed to fit. She takes us to the house that she had sold to a local church and told us about all the changes that had been made, etc. She started making plans to buy a convenience store, talked to the owner selling it, and started working out all of the details. She even made plans for her friend to attend a cooking class with my sister and aunt, but had to cancel last minute via Jessica. So here starts the plot twist. All of a sudden, she calls the whole deal off. She claimed that the ICE had frozen her accounts because her friend and business partner was being investigated for tax evasion. She was so scared to even buy a pack of gum. So, she hired a lawyer, took care of the matter with the ICE and another to deal with her sister, who coincidentally decided to sue her at about the same time. Well, my uncle is a service writer at a local book dealer and is well known and liked by local book patrons. One of these said patrons, who knew my dad, uncle, and Jessica, was there around Christmas and just mentioned that she wasn't who she seemed. Though, we all were catching on to the obvious fallacies. This was just icing on the cake, so to speak. Dad decided to do some digging and found out some inaccuracies about her background. He tracked down her sister, we will call her Claire, and talked to her. Come to find out, her stories about caring for her parents was her sister's story. Her son lived in the next city the whole time and wanted nothing to do with him. She had a friend that had had a motorcycle wreck that she visited a lot, which turned out to be her ex-husband. She didn't have just one child, but 5, 4 of which she had literally sold. She would raise them to 18 months and find a buyer to adopt them. She had been married 3 times previously, not the ones that she had told my dad. There was no money, or businesses, or even the friends that she constantly talked about. Nothing at all was real. Nothing. Even the house that she sold was her ex-brother-in-law's house. Her entire life was cherry-picked stories from her family's life. Claire told him that he was the fastest to figure it out. She was being sued by her sister and mother to get her removed from being the executor of her father's estate due to being mentally incapable of doing so. So, now my dad is seeking an annulment to the marriage. My sister found 2 of her children and talked to them about the whole thing. It was just a crazy whirlwind of disbelief, with new info being uncovered daily. I'm sure I've left out a bunch of craziness, but I think I've hit the high spots. TLDR, dad meets woman, marries woman, then woman turns out to be a pathological liar with a mind-blowing past. I was attacked by a police dog when I was a kid. After that, big dogs and especially German shepherds gave me enormous willies. I was working at a demolitions plant for a bit, and I was the only girl there, so I got a lot of weird attention from the guys. And we had this dog, a gigantic black German shepherd that was our night guard's buddy, that would just stand in the office and stare at me. Never made a peep, or moved quick or anything, but would just stare. I learned to just ignore the fucking dog after a while, but I'd turn around, and it'd be sitting in the corner, staring. Anyway, we had this delivery guy who would come in. After the first visit, he knew my name and kept making me take him to different offices in the plant instead of walking there himself. There was something real off about him because he kept acting like a real sleazy frat boy with the way he would slip stuff into conversations, asking me where I live / if I had a boyfriend. I also never gave him my name. Anyway, the third time he comes in he makes me take him to the furthest away building. I really didn't want to. I even stood outside and pointed at the building, but he insisted I come. All of a sudden the dog shows up and starts following me. I was pretty nervous because it started acting super aggressive for the first time. Snarling, growling, hair raising, big black eyes all open. I was like, oh fuck, I'm going to get murdered by a damn dog. At one point, when I was walking, the guy tries to put a hand on my shoulder, still pretty innocent, but and then the dog goes after the delivery guy, shoves its snout in his crock, gets between his legs, almost knocks him over. Never barks, no real noise. After that, the guy never ever came by to bother me again. I'd just see him walk past my desk to go straight to his destinations. TLDR, I like dogs a lot now. In middle school I was desperately in like with a girl who I will refer to as Sarah. She was the first girl I found balls enough to tell her that I liked her. She thought it was sweet, but said her mom didn't want her in a relationship yet. Keep that in mind. Around this time my best friend introduced me to a kid who I will refer to as Randy. We had common interests in games, TV, and music. After a month of hanging out, Randy became best friend number 2. At this point he liked a girl named Jen. He was so paranoid he asked me to shake hands on a pact that we would never go for the girl the other liked. Brothers for life, I thought, and shook. Anyway, for all of 7th and 8th grade, I would hang out with Sarah, talk on the phone every day, and when we both got cell phones and texting we would talk from the moment we woke up until one of us fell asleep with phone in hand. A lot of people, parents included, figured we were together but not saying anything because of Sarah's mom and her anti-dating rule. The big 8th grade formal rolled around. Randy manned up and asked Jen, and she said yes. Sarah had told me she was going with her best friend, Sally, since neither wanted to worry about boys. I ended up going alone, but with intentions to finally get Sarah. I arrived at the formal with my best friend, Randy, and 2 other dudes who were in our posse. Randy meets up with Jen right away. My best friend hung out with the DJ the entire night, and the other dude scoured the floor for girls. The first slow song hit, and I saw Randy and Jen kiss. Oh, how sweet. After the song, Sally, Sarah's best friend, came up to me and said Sarah was in hysterics outside. I went outside and tried to console her. Turns out, she was very in like with Randy, and seeing him with Jen killed her. I tried to calm her down. I figured I would ask her to dance the next slow song with me. She kept crying. Sally called her mom and the 2 of them went home early. Desperate, I walked back in and asked the first cute girl I saw to dance with me for the last song of the night. Quiet, smart, athletic girl named Kelly. I wish I knew it then, but Kelly had a crush on me. She told me years later at a New Year's party, and we both laughed about everything that was about to transpire in 12/13-year-old me's world. Summer happens. I spend time with my friends, especially my best and Randy. We're thick as thrives. I also hang out with Sarah at least once a week. Still very in like with her and talk/text all day, every day. Going into freshman year at high school, Randy dumps Jen. To my glee, Randy, my best friend, Sally, and Sarah all had a class together. We stay in close proximity and things were cool. Until winter formal. I asked Sarah to go with me. She gently put me down and said she only liked me as a friend. I asked her why we ended up so close and told her I felt lead on. She proceeded to tell me that everything, every text, call, hangout, conversation, hug, and high five was all a test. A test starting with exchanging phone numbers. She wanted to see how giving a guy her number would play out, so she could tweak her game when she asked Randy for his number. I was floored. The entire friendship was a complete lie. She then said, if Randy didn't ask her to winter formal, I could take her. Randy found out. He then went to Sarah and told her that I, not he, had wanted a bro pact, and that's why Randy kept turning Sarah down. They wound up in a relationship not 10 minutes later and each other's date for the formal. In the span of 20 minutes, I found out that the girl I liked played me like a Nintendo 64 and one of my best friends had betrayed me faster than Judas running to the Romans. Sally, Sarah's bestie, called me that night and related the furious fuck off from Sarah as well as the news of betrayal. Randy made everyone think I was an asshole when I hadn't done a thing but try and be a good friend. Formal sucked, wound up going with Sally as a favor. While there, Sarah and Randy made out all night. They never danced. They just sat in a corner and tongue wrestled. Each of them shot me glares if I had to walk past them. The after party was just as awkward. Here we are at Randy's house and everyone has coupled off. Except me, Sally, this other strange girl, and Randy's ex Jen. I wanted no part of it, so I called for a ride home and said I ate something with too much cheese, sensitive stomach, and didn't want to destroy the toilets at Randy's house. My dad, being lactose intolerant, understood and picked me up. The next day I got a call from Sarah. She told me all about kissing Randy, how he had loved her for so long, but was trapped by my paranoid pact, and then said she let Randy steal second base. I was pissed. I hung up and called Sarah's mom directly as I had her number from the times before Sarah got a cell phone and her mom would call mine to get her outside for a ride home. I told Mrs. Sarah's mama about the boyfriend, the kissing, and the groping. The next day in a school, Sarah handed Randy a note and ran off teary-eyed. Randy came to me later and said he needed a friend to talk to. Sarah dumped him and he was distraught. I told him I was pissed about everything and he, to my surprise, broke down and apologized for lying to me about me and making me look like a jerk. I told him about how Sarah played me and warned him that if she would do that to me, she'd do it to him. He agreed. I ended up telling him about the phone call to her mom too. He was mad, but after the truth about Sarah's deception he got over it. Or so I thought. 2 weeks later they were back together and he told her everything I had said during that conversation. Betrayed twice by the same people in less than a month. This time, Sarah convinced her mom to drop the no dating rule, so they were unstoppable. I gave up and moved on. They were together until senior year, when Sarah dumped Randy for his new best friend. Randy then tried to warn him about Sarah using me as the example, but this time, it was Randy who was cast out. He had experienced everything I went through and ended up at senior prom alone, unlike me who went to my senior prom, my date's junior prom. She was a year younger and my good friend from a girls' school's mix-a prom thing. I went to 3, he went alone to 1. I felt bad, but we never reconnected. Even years later. I hear Sarah is now dating a guy 10 years her senior and is on her way to becoming a certified gold digger. Biggest plot twist of all these, that I came out the winner and have never dealt with them since. Edits, iPhone autocorrects and a few awkwardly worded sentences. The first girl I dated in high school had led a faked up life when I met her. Born in Poland, when she was a baby her parents had been killed in a civil dispute and her aunt in America adopted her and her sisters. They lived in New York and her aunt used to leave her in the care of her uncle, aunt's brother. They moved after it finally came out that her uncle had been tying her up and raping her on a regular basis. I held her a few terrible nights, shivering and crying, when the guy had been calling her, threatening to come find her. Then the worst came on a day I was readying to go to practice for a play I was in. She came to me in tears. Her sister, pregnant, has committed suicide the night before. I skipped play practice. Held her all afternoon as she cried. When her mother came home, no one talked about it. I remember thinking how strong they were both being, acting like nothing was wrong. Prom came. My parents followed the limo we'd rented over to her house for pictures of me picking her up. We drove off for a wonderful night. Didn't get home until the sun was high the next morning. As I began walking toward the house, I heard the phone ringing. By the time I got inside, the answering machine was going. It was my girlfriend weeping, apologizing, because everything she'd ever told me was a lie. Taking pictures at her mother's house, my parents had offered condolences for the loss of her sister. Her mother had no idea what they were talking about. Her sister was fine. There was no rapist uncle. She was born in Baltimore, taken from her real parents because they were crack addicts. That faking day was the most surreal day of my life. Well, I'm sure that I'm several hours too late to this thread, but I'll type it up anyway. During pre-orientation for college, I met a girl that I quickly became good friends with. We ended up being in 3 out of 4 of the same classes, so much of our time, both in and out of class, was spent together. We start dating about a month later, and everything is good. Over the next couple of months, we get to know each other better and better. I knew she was a bio major, and expanding on that, I asked if there was anything in particular within biology that she was interested in. She tells me about research she did in high school for various science fairs. I thought this was fascinating, because it was apparently very normal to do lots of science fairs in high school where she lived, but not at all where I did. She told me about one of her projects in particular that she did for an event called ISEF. ISEF is the International Science and Engineering Fair, pretty much the highest event for high school science fairs. I said, what a coincidence. I volunteered at ISEF. It was hosted right near my house. We had a small no way moment and then put it aside. A couple of weeks later, I get a friend request on Facebook. Didn't go to my high school, doesn't go to my college. One mutual friend, my girlfriend. I thought that it was probably just some guy that added me from the suggested friends list. I felt bad clicking decline friend request, so I just left it there. Maybe 6 or 8 months later, I'm showing my girlfriend a picture of one of my high school friends on Facebook. She's flipping through pictures when she says, "Hey, you have a new friend request. Is it okay if I see who it is?" I tell her yes, and it's someone that I had met a couple of days ago. She says, "Hey, you also have a friend request from Victor, name changed. How do you know him?" I tell her that I don't know him and ask her where she knows him from. She tells me she knows him from ISEF. He was one of the other delegates from her state. Rewind to high school. In high school, I spent my senior year abroad. Except I went to Japan, and Japan's school year starts in April, so I was gone from March to February. As a result, it was more like a gap year than my senior year. Anyway, point is that I got back to the States in February, and college didn't start until September, so I had 7 months to kill. I looked for a job, but couldn't even find one flipping burgers or bagging cans. I blame the economy. I ended up volunteering at my local library and cleaning out my dad's garage, which hadn't been cleaned in about 15 years. In early May, a friend told me about ISEF. He said they needed volunteers, and as I was big into biology, I decided to check it out. It wasn't paid, but I'd get free admission and meals. For a week, I was a general volunteer and Japanese interpreter for some of the Japanese teams. One day I was eating lunch, and I ended up chatting with some of the participants. I said that I was going to university, which was in the same state as he was from. He says, "Oh, there's one girl from my state's delegation going there. Where is she? Does anyone know where Lily, name changed, is?" Unfortunately, he can't find her. Lunch ends, and I go back to work. He tells me her project is on testing the effects of curcumin on breast cancer. During one of my breaks, I go to check it out, but unfortunately she's not at the booth when I went. Flashback to the present. I realize that Victor is the guy I was talking to at lunch, and the girl that was doing the research on curcumin was my girlfriend. We had a much bigger no way moment then. TLDR, volunteered at a science fair, almost met my future girlfriend from several thousand miles away. It also turns out that one of the Japanese teachers at the college I'm studying abroad at, in Japan, is good friends with my high school college advisor. Go figure. This'll be buried, but, about a year ago, my dad and I got really interested in our family history. My dad lives in the south, and doesn't have a computer or internet other than his phone, so he asked me to see what I could dig up. I did a little Google foo, and actually found quite a bit. Our whole lives, we had believed, were Irish and Scottish. Turned out we were actually Scottish and English, and on top of that, our ancestors were knights and nobility. We thought this was really cool, so we got more serious. I got onto genealogy websites, digging through more than a century's worth of census, birth, death, and marriage certificates, definitively tracing our lineage back as far as I could, to a man named Henry B. After we got as far as we could with records, my father and I decided to get some DNA testing done on one of those websites that connects you to people of the same genetic lineage, so you can create a larger picture of your family tree. So I ordered a test, sent my DNA sample back in, and joined the group project for my surname. When I joined the project, they asked for some basic information, name, birth date, place of birth, etc., and for the name of my oldest known relative, so I put down the name of Henry B., the man I had, without any possibility of error, traced back as our great etc. grandfather. A few months later, the moderator of the group sent me an email, stating that I could not genetically be related to Henry B. This confused me, and I talked to my dad about it, who talked to his mom about it. His mother immediately stated accusing my mother of cheating on my dad, and that's why my DNA test came up negative for the match. Our rebuttal to this was that my dad and I are practically the same person. From our height, to our hair, looks, and even mannerisms, we are nearly identical. When I visit him, people mistake me for him all the time. After doing a little more digging on the genetic DNA service, I looked at my haplogroup results next to every other member of the project I was in. My DNA didn't match a single member that shared my name. I tell my dad, and he confronts his mom. After a lot of backpedaling and lying, she admitted that she had an affair, many, actually, and she wasn't sure who my father's real father was. We've both more or less disowned her since then, and I'm in the process of changing my name. All I know now is that genetically, I'm Norwegian, which seems kind of like a cruel joke, because I'm 5 feet 6 inches. TLDR, studied up on my family history, took a DNA test, found out I wasn't related to the rest of my family, and that my grandmother was a harlot, and I don't know anything about my biological family, except that I'm a midget Viking. This probably won't be seen, but I have one for the books. My senior year in college I lived in a house with 5 other girls. One of my housemates, Jen, was dating this guy named Bill for almost 2 years. We all knew Bill very well. He was always around, a great friend and kind of our protector. He lived in a house with 2 other guys, not too far away, and they always used to throw pretty solid house parties that we would frequent often. So one of Bill's roommates, let's call him Dag, was dating this chick on and off throughout college. Let's call her Kathy. As senior year is starting, Bill throws a wild Halloween party, and we are hanging with good friends, having an awesome time, and in walks Kathy to the party. She is dressed as a box of wine, using her nipples as 2 spouts. Very cute outfit. One of my housemates is dressed up as a white trash bride, wearing a tight white t-shirt that says bride to be, and she stuffed a pillow in her shirt to make it look like she was preggo, rolled some cigarettes in her sleeve. It was pretty classic. Kathy and my housemate take a pic together. The night goes on, we all booze and have a grand old time. Fast forward 5 months, it's March. Lots of parties have been thrown at Bill's house, lots of great times. Lots of hanging out with Dag and Kathy, major boozing, major ganja smoking, just a terrific senior year so far. One Sunday night we are all at Bill's house just casually hanging out, watching some college basketball, when Kathy gets up to go to the bathroom. She is in there for a while, unnoticed by any of us really, and then we hear her call for Dag. She tells Dag to call 911B/C. She is having a faking baby. Plot twist. She knew she was pregnant all along, and Dad had no faking idea. She hid her weight gain well, and continued to booze and smoke throughout her pregnancy. She didn't really come back to school after the incident, and Dad was pretty faked up from it. But the part that makes the whole story is, when we looked through those Halloween party photos and came to the pic of Kathy and my white trash bride roommate, we can't help but laugh. My roommate had dressed up as Kathy for Halloween, basically foreshadowing the whole incident. A few months ago my mom got a call that her brother committed suicide in the wee hours of the morning. She had a goodbye text from him, Zach, and knew the reasoning behind everything. It must have been pretty embarrassing, or a large thing, because no one would tell me what was going on. Zach had been an alcoholic his entire life, so I figured it was something to do with that. Over the next few weeks, I learned that my uncle committed suicide to avoid going to prison. Later I found out that the reason he was going to prison was that he molested my female cousin and not his daughter while on a drinking binge many years ago. Zach was too drunk to remember it and nothing came of it for a while. Apparently something that happened in school set off an about the memories of it. The teaching staff got involved and they gathered what they needed to press charges against Zach, who moved halfway across the country. Later I learned that his suicide note said that he would never go to prison and that this is the only way to provide for my son. I couldn't do that in prison. See you in hell, mother of Anne, Zach's sister. So now since he died, his alcoholic wife, who has never worked a day in her life, is the only provider for their son Rich. She's never worked, and she never will. The money Social Security gives to Rich's upbringing, some sort of government funding, I'm not sure exactly what it is from, is the money she raises Rich on. Rich is a pretty cool kid. I thought he was autistic for a while, because he was extremely socially awkward but extremely intelligent. He's getting with socialization now, still real smart. I think he is the way he is from having shitty parents who were constantly drunk, and he would just surf the internet reading up while they were partying. He's surprisingly naive still, given what he's had to live with. Well, I'm getting off topic now. I'm gonna go see if Rich is on Sparks Live, so I can hang out with the little dude. Edit, words and things. So, I meet this guy and right away I'm smitten. But, I was still dealing with a lot of emotional fallout from a previous relationship, and was in the middle of becoming openly polyamorous, so I tell him right out of the gate that I like him, but want to keep it casual, because I'm not emotionally equipped for anything more. We agree, things are awesome for a few months. We are friends that occasionally have wicked sex. Eventually I realize that I'm fully in love with this guy, and, instead of confessing, I freaked out and hid it. Poorly. I tell him we need to not have sex so much. At this point we were hanging out 3 times a week, and having sex lots. Like, lots? He says okay, not so much sex, but pushes me for a valid reason. I tell him, I like you way more than I expected I would, and I'm starting to get really attached. We decided to not hang out as much, and only have emotionless sex. I should clarify, neither of us were into a relationship and we both have intimacy issues. Fast forward again a few months. I'm miserable. I love this guy with everything I'm and tell him I can't do the casual sex thing anymore. It's too difficult. I'm very confused and need time. He's supportive and is clear that he is my friend and is there for me if I need to talk. We barely spoke for 5 months. Then, randomly, he calls and invites me to hang out. We play some video games and smoke some weed, watch a movie. And, I notice that he's in physical pain, shifting a lot, rubbing his neck. I know he works a physical job and sometimes he gets body pain. I offer a neck massage. I'm a care aide and have some training in massage and physical therapy, so I'm not thinking sexy things as I start to work on his neck and shoulders. Suddenly, he spins around and kisses me. Full on, awesome kiss. I'm flabbergasted. We sit down to talk, and he confesses that he can't do this anymore. He's in love with me. Always has been, ever since we first met nearly a year ago. We talked for a long time, and figured out that we were both so scared of losing each other by being too forward, that we nearly lost each other. We are still together, and still very much in love. So I once had this cat that we adopted from a farm litter. After a year or so the cat grew up and started attacking me and my sister. We were like 3 and 5, like straight up stalking under tables and then pouncing on our back. This happened for a while, however my mom was in denial and in love with this cat. However, one day she came back home to pick something up and saw the cat outside fighting with another cat. So she tries to break up the fight and take our cat inside. That's when the cat turned on her, tearing up her arm making it a bloody mess. That was the last straw. She took it to the vet to be put down, now believing us. At the vet the nurse assistant couldn't bear to see the cat being put down, so she wanted to adopt it. Mom just wanted it out of the house and gave it up. A few months later we are watching the news when one of the Adopt a Friend specials, where they feature animals to be adopted on TV, come up and our cat is on TV. This happens at least 2 more times. My sister also volunteered at the shelter a few times. She said that this cat was in a separate room by itself with a red collar around its neck. It means it was not good with people. This was over a period of maybe 4 years, all those different things. Then we stop hearing of it, and it basically leaves our mind. Anyway, fast forward and it is the beginning of the summer of my 9th grade year, age 14, and this awesome cat starts hanging around our pool, lounging around in the sun, strutting around, no noticeable tags, and my friends name it Theodore, because it was so cool. A month or so later, our neighbor from the other side of the neighborhood knocks at our door asking if we have seen his cat, because it is missing. It was Theodore from the pool, and he had apparently picked up the cat here before, and thought to try again. We said no. But my mom, being all friendly and such, asked some questions about the cat. Plot twist, this cat, Theodore, is the same devil cat from before. Our neighbor calls the cat Boots. We called it Kitty Boots, even though it wasn't a kitty anymore. It had white feet that looked like boots, and said that he had gotten it from a shelter. The shelter had had the cat for, he said, for quite a few years, and said that the previous owner's children had taken it into a room and beat it. Meaning that the shelter said that we had taken this cat at age 5 and tried to kill it. We didn't. My mom connect all the dots there at the door with him, but decided not to tell him. Anyway, after that we were weary of the cat and started to notice that it was acting up again. This cat, I shit you not, backed 2 other cats and a dog into a fence corner until we heard the noise and came and broke it up. We started to get the cat away from now on. My mom even tried shooing it away with a rake, but that badass cat attacked her and drew blood through a pair of jeans. We haven't seen the cat for a while now, but I have no doubt it escaped its owner and is now hunting deer in the forest. TLDR cat almost gets put down, returns to old home, terrorizes neighborhood. Happened to a good friend of mine. So my friend, let's call him Bubba, meets a nice girl at work and they have many common interests. This is not actually unusual, since Bubba knows and likes a lot of things. Bubba thinks she's hot, but she has low self-esteem, not uncommon, so Bubba ignores this. Bubba and she talk for a few days and things accelerate. One day he takes her to a bar for a drink and they basically express interest in each other and are officially dating. Soon, he takes her to his apartment and things start heating up. They have a drink and make out while watching a movie and are now mostly unclothed. At this point, she says she's hungry, so he goes to the kitchen to bring something to munch on. When he comes back, she's all dressed. I want to leave, she says. Now? Yes, right now. What's wrong? I know you are a serial killer and you are planning to kill me. Bubba notices her phone is out and her finger is on the call key. 911 is already typed in. Okay, let's go. Bubba quickly puts on his clothes and drops her back to her place. Bubba is relieved he probably just escaped being arrested for attempted rape or whatever. This is some serious shit. After a couple of days, Bubba's curiosity gets better of him and he texts her to ask if she's doing okay. They text some more, and the next thing that happens is Bubba is visiting her again at her place, where they engage in some more fooling around. At this point, she vows her everlasting love to him. Bubba is happy with the development and dismisses the prior incident as some kind of misunderstanding, and is glad to be with this woman. Bubba goes on a business trip right after for a couple of weeks. When he gets back, she breaks up with him. There is a lot more crazy stuff I have skipped, since it's hard to relate without context. I'm at a party, everyone is drunk. Bro answers my phone, it's my ex, she's on every drug imaginable and crying. Backstory: she cheated on me with her ex that abused her, that I saved her from, and cheated on me with numerous other guys. Needless to say, I had a strong love/hate feeling towards her. His stupid drunk ass invites her over. I'm trying to get with some other girl and realize my time is short. I end up in bed with this girl trying to get my drunk ass friend out of the room so we can do our business, but he's busy putting on eyeliner and throwing glass cups and pictures against the wall. Other friend, who's been passing out every 30 seconds and waking back up, artsy plus alcohol plus depression plus no sleep, walks in, immediately sees what is going on and drags drunk ass out. So we get down to business. Now we are finished and I go to the bathroom to pee. I walk back in, she threw up on the carpet and is looking for her lip ring in the throw up. I say fuck it and start searching through it. As I'm looking up to her to say I can't find it, I see it in her lip. I grab a towel to clean up the mess and she crawls on the bed, naked. I hear a door slam. I know who it is and I know I've got to hide. I hop into the closet but do not have time to close the door in fear of noise. The lights are off as my ex walks in. She walks forward to examine the naked chick half asleep on the bed. At the spot she is in, I'm directly behind her staring at the back of her head. She stands there possibly in awe at a naked girl, possibly thinking it was me that got her naked. With a slight chance of getting away here, I stood quietly. She's about to move, I know it. I have a 50/50 chance of her turning clockwise and seeing me, or counterclockwise and walking off in confusion. She chose to turn clockwise. Now here we are staring face to face with guilt plastered on my face. She runs out the room and outside. I'm a nice person, so I go out there to talk to her. She starts speaking and it's apparent she is faked on drugs, possibly coke, X, alcohol, weed. We start to argue and she wants to leave. I tell her to fuck herself if she thinks I'm about to let her drive when she's messed up. We go back inside. I get slapped for not letting her leave again. Full force slap, had to control urges to strike back. She slaps my passing in and out friend, startles his faded state of mind, and almost hits her. I tell everyone it's about time to sleep. At this time everyone who doesn't live at the apt is gone. I lay on a chair, she goes on the couch, other two go to rooms. In the awkward midst of silence in the living room, she says in a tiny voice, "Can you lay with me, please?" I felt like she was going to ask 100 times. I gave up on the first time and laid on the couch with her. I'm ready to sleep, so I pass right out. 7 hours later I wake up and she is kissing me. I haven't been brought to my senses and it felt so good I started kissing her. One thing leads to the next and she is going down on me. After it's over she snuggles back up to me. I look at her and all of a sudden she has a horrible look on her face, like she just seen someone die a gruesome death. Without saying a word she runs to the bathroom. At this point in confusion I ask what's wrong. Her answer gave me the biggest high I've ever felt. She yelled from the bathroom, "You had sex with that girl and I just sucked your dick." I couldn't help but feel like I accomplished a goal of revenge without ever trying. I sat there on the couch glowing with badassery among my face. I get up, walk in the bathroom. Here she is with a toothbrush in her mouth and holding a razor in her hand, cutting her wrist. Looking up at me with a look of pain and guilt. I remember we have no toothpaste, so this is my chance to show I give no fucks about her wrist cutting. I pull the toothbrush out her mouth, look at it, and then look at her and say, "There's no toothpaste on your toothbrush, drop it," and walk away. Throwaway account and names have been changed to protect identities. One of my best friends from high school, John, was a pretty normal guy. Average student, good athlete. We were close friends from a young age because we both came from military families. Anyways, we graduated and his lifelong dream of joining the army had been changed due to his girlfriend's displeasure with it. He told us he had gotten her to agree to join the Coast Guard since it was much safer. He went to the Coast Guard Academy for a week in July for swab summer and even befriended a girl, Sally, doing the same, who we all friended on MySpace. He comes back from his week away, breaks up with his girlfriend, and later decides to join the army. Seems pretty standard. Upon digging into the traditions of swab summer, my other friend and I stumble onto some things. Mainly swab summer is for sophomores, not for incoming cadets. It also is a 7-week course, not one. We then dig into Sally's profile, 2 pictures, one of her face, the other of the Coast Guard Academy emblem. And she is only friends with John and the handful of us who befriended her. We question what the fuck he actually did on this week away. John just gets pissed at us, calls us assholes, so we drop it. Years go by, John spends his 4 years in the army, gets out and moves to another state to live with his family. We get sporadic reports from him and Facebook updates about how he is loving life, going to school, and friends with these 2 fairly hot chicks, Jane and Diane. They do everything together, lots of check-ins, lots of parties, and even a trip to Miami together, which he later claimed ended in a threesome. He then decides to move to yet another state to go to a new school. We call bullshit because Mary lives there and goes to the same school. John loved Mary in high school and even told us he still had feelings for her. Anyway, after spending a year in a school and many emotional calls / Facebook updates, it's obvious Mary still has no interest, but they were still friends, friend-zoned. So he tells us he has joined a private security detail and would be heading back to Afghanistan in July with them. John, being the soldier that he was, it surprised no one. Well, I received a message on Facebook in the middle of the night from Jane stating that John had been in a firefight and there was an explosion. He was in critical condition and a coma, and they didn't know if he was gonna make it. Eventually he was well enough to be moved from Afghan to Frankfurt and eventually the current state he lived in with Mary. He got better after a while and was back kicking ass, taking names like he always did. Well, he ended up at a club one night and, according to Diane in a late night Facebook message, got stabbed in the back while trying to defend some girls. Again critical, again pulls back from it. Fast forward to 2 months ago. I'm engaged and John's army buddy Matt adds me as a friend on Facebook. Whatever, I add people all the time. Never talked to him before, no pictures of him with John, but lots of Facebook activity with him, and John ended up the best man at his wedding. I get a troubled Facebook message from John telling me he wasn't sure if he was gonna make my wedding next summer, which he was to be a groomsman. He had been diagnosed with kidney cancer, and if nothing changed he had 18 months to live. Frantic tear-filled calls, and lots of emotion happens, but I accept my best friend is gonna die. Then 2 weeks later I get a message from Matt that he was in the hospital with a stroke, and they are declaring him brain dead. I'm a mess. I didn't get to really say goodbye or have one last beer with him. But like faking normal, he miraculously pulls through, but is without his memory. Mary comes to his side, which she seems to be the only person he kind of remembers. Mary calls me in tears to fill me in on some gaps in his story. He actually didn't have 18 months left but 6. The cancer had spread to his brain. The pills he was taking to treat the cancer caused him to become suicidal, and he attempted suicide the previous weekend. We were all a wreck. It was a real faking nightmare. Anyways, Matt messages me saying Mary is a huge bitch. He hates her, she's leading him on, and she is actually having an affair with a married man, to which John has no clue of, before or after the amnesia. Meanwhile, Matt supposedly confronts Mary about this, which Mary doesn't confirm nor deny, but Matt then mysteriously vanishes of FB. That is when Mary contacts me again to say something was very odd. She had never met Matt in person, despite being close friends with John. Nor had she met Jane or Diane, or even his other friend Samantha, again with a Facebook. Lots of check-ins with John, but not photographs of them together. Just a FB with a profile picture, and all their friends are John's friends, and their only activity is with John. Quickly Mary gets freaked out, puts a restraining order on John, and tells me she isn't even sure if the cancer/memory loss is real. She called his mom asking about it, which she angrily hung up the phone. John calls me to tell me Mary is crazy, and that she has in fact met these people before. I call his mom, just asking if John had cancer, which she said yes. I didn't push her on any subjects, like fake friends or amnesia, but I wouldn't to confirm at least something was true. And the kicker is we looked into some of his stories. Looked up the directory at the college he is attending. Not listed, not even his classmate Samantha. Looked up some sporting event he supposedly won. Didn't happen. The company that is sponsoring him for this sport. He is not listed anywhere on their site. Jane, who supposedly an ex-GF's sister. We checked with the ex, who still lives near me. She doesn't have a sister. Contacted by Jane and Diane on FB. Zero activity since he left their state. Didn't respond to my messages either. Our best guess at this point is my friend has multiple personality disorder and is making these people up. He probably does have cancer and tells me he is going to treatment and is taking time off school to get treatment. Mary has a restraining order against him, but he is looking to move away now. I haven't told him our suspicions about the Facebook profiles, and I'm unsure how to handle it. But yeah, crazy sheet. TLD, our best friend moved away, stumbled on he may have multiple personality disorder. About 15 years ago, as a single parent with a child, I ran to the grocery store to pick up some contact solution in the next town. At that time, not only did I want a man to call my own, but also a good man to help me raise my child. So hearing I should pray about it and be specific with what I'd pray for. God will answer your prayers. So I would say, God, please find me a good Christian man for me and my child. In the store I saw this man who from the back I thought might be someone I'd be interested in. I followed him, and to my surprise we both turned out at the same aisle in search of contact solution. To my delight he was quite handsome, but when facing me, I saw that he was wearing clerical clothing, all black with a white collar. I wasn't sure what his religion was. I laughed inside and thought I wasn't specific enough with my prayer. So I continued to pray, God, find me a good Christian man who would be interested in me. A few years later, a new priest showed up at our parish. He was the same person I remembered seeing at the store. My child, maybe 5th grade, attends the parochial school, and my kid along with another friend one day tell me that we are all going out and they have arranged a date for me. I was curious about who they'd pick for me, and both announced that it has all been arranged. Both kids were very excited. They told me they already talked with father and we are all going out tonight. My girlfriend was furious and thought it was very inappropriate. Well, we all went out together, and I never said a word to the kids, and neither of us mentioned anything about the store. Not sure father remembered me, but I remembered him. I lived close to the rectory, so one day father called to borrow something, and once again my girlfriend was furious. Frequently I'd see father in passing. Even though there is more to the story about things we shared in common and understood about each other, there was never any kind of close contact between us or arranged meetings. I never let on that I found him attractive cause I saw him as already taken and unavailable. Probably 3 years later a scandal broke in our parish. A woman was pregnant and father was leaving. I was shocked, but then not really. I thought, DMN, what was I thinking to let a fine man like that go? To this day I believe priests should be allowed to marry. All the old women of the parish thought father was just terrible. When anyone mentioned his name, I responded, I'm very happy that he has found what makes him happy. I'm not married, and I stopped praying. In fact, I stopped going to church due to differences I now feel about the church's teachings. A few years ago I was an AA sponsor to a young girl. Let's call her Kylie. She was a very sweet, quiet, smart girl who everyone seemed to like, although she was a bit awkward. We were close in age and had many mutual friends, so we ended up hanging out socially quite a bit also. Now this girl had quite a traumatic past. Her father had sexually abused her all her life and then died in a car accident when she was a teenager. Her super religious mother knew all along about the abuse and refused to acknowledge it. She had also had a boyfriend die at some point. She sunk pretty far into alcohol and drugs and ended in rehab. So after I had been sponsoring her for a few months, her mother gets cancer. She's obviously upset. Myself and her other friends help her deal with it as best we can. Then, her mother kills herself rather than face the grueling treatments. Her evil super religious sister blames Kylie and cuts her out of all of the funeral arrangements, going so far as to tell her the wrong day for the funeral so that Kylie misses it. Then, 2 months later, Kylie's sister kills herself. A month after that, the sister's husband shoots himself in the head while on the phone with Kylie as he blames her for his grief. Kylie is now without any family as both of her parents were only children and her grandparents died years before. Kylie starts getting headaches. She begins having lightheadedness and blurred vision. She goes to the doctor, tests run. Kylie has a brain tumor. She collapses on a train platform while in another state visiting college friends and has emergency surgery. A childhood friend of hers rushes to be by her side and keeps in contact with myself and her other friends via text, updating us on her condition. Kylie comes home and begins radiation treatment. She moves in with a friend and the community rallies around her, everyone pitching in to help care for this sweet girl who has no family. She requests that we not tell everyone about her situation, so that she can maintain some normalcy, so only a circle of about 10 to 15 people know. She leans very heavily on one friend in particular, the one she is living with, even sleeping in the same bed with her. We drive her to doctor's appointments, classes, the emergency room, hold her head while she pukes. She loses her hair and has spells of temporary blindness and memory loss. Sometimes she forgets that her family is dead and we have to remind her. Thus goes on for several months. Things look grave and I begin to wonder how this many awful things can happen to one sweet girl. Plot twist. One night I get a phone call. The friend she had been staying with confronts her about some inconsistencies in her story. After quite a bit of prodding and threatening, she admits she does not have cancer. She made it all up as a way to deal with the grief of losing her entire family. Second plot twist. The next day, several of us start questioning all of the things she has told us over the past year. We confront her and demand to see death certificates. She admits she lied. Her family is alive. When she was supposedly having emergency surgery in another city, she was actually at Disney World with her mother. Also, the childhood best friend was really Kylie all along. That's why he only communicated with us via text. Her supposedly dead mother. We call her mother right then and there and request that she get her daughter help. She drives from her home 3 hours away that night and is completely baffled. Does not seem to understand that for nearly a year her daughter was pretending she was dead. Third plot twist. The mother checks Kylie into some sort of facility. One friend follows up after a few weeks, finds out that Kylie has admitted that the sexual abuse by her actually dead father never happened. There's also a long list of other, more minor, things that never actually happened. TLDR, me and my friends were hijacked by a sociopath who made up a fake persona and invaded our lives for nearly 2 years. I used to have a friend that we will call Bob. Bob loved pot, which was okay, because this is Denver, where it was legal for medical use. And Bob had his medical marijuana card. It's important to know that Bob was a very naive guy. He had a faked up childhood because his mom suffered serious mental illness and killed his dad, so he went from home to home and therapy etc. So Bob was not good with the ladies at all. So Bob meets this girl at a coffee shop in Denver. I introduced him to her. She hit on him. She asked him out etc. Next thing you know, he is having a full-blown relationship with this girl. She was his first girlfriend ever. They did all the normal couple stuff together, like going to bars, spending all day together, sleeping over, and lots of sex. Bob was happy. Then one day, while his girlfriend is over, the cops bust down Bob's door and arrest him due to all the pot plants he had growing there. He had more than was allowed, probably by a lot. Anyways, the cops separate everyone and question them and get identification. When it's Bob's turn, the cops shake him down for providing pot to a minor, and they also accused him of having a sexual relationship with a minor. Bob could not understand what they were talking about, and they showed him his girlfriend's ID. Plot twist. She was only 15. He insisted he had no clue, and he didn't. He was also smart and denied having a sexual relationship with her, though he could not deny providing her pot, as they were caught red-handed. And this girl was smart enough to deny she had a sexual relationship with him as well. In the end, he was charged for possession of all the pot and giving it to minors, but he got very lucky and was never charged with sex with a minor. Part of his probation was that he was not allowed around the girl, and if he was caught with her or even contacting her, he'd spend the rest of his probation in jail. Most peer wonder how he could not have known her age, and he insisted she acted much older, never went to school, had a job, stayed the night at his house all the time, and even went to the bars with him. Turns out she had a fake id. Her parents never grounded her or stopped her from ditching school and staying at Bob's house. Even Bob's friends who were less naive had no clue. She told him she was 22. He was 25, I think, at the time. Worst part is, because she was Bob's first girlfriend, first unpaid sexual partner, etc. Bob is still stupid in love with her, and it kills him every day that he can't even have a conversation with her. He has resolved to start their relationship again when she turns 18. In fact, it's been a few years since all this. I should call him and see how it all worked out. Back in May, my family opened a restaurant. We immediately hire my lifelong next door neighbor and close friend. Let's call him MJ. Everything is pretty shaky because it's the first few months of a restaurant that had next to no business before we moved in. MJ backs us 100%, takes shifts for anyone anytime. Me and him basically become attached at the hip because we work together and still live next door to one another. My parents treat him as one of the family. They let him hang out when I'm not there, even let him use their car when he needs it. Fast forward to November. I pick up rent money from a house in Philadelphia where I'm still paying rent and stuff. My check hadn't cleared yet, so I just bring the money home expecting to go back up the next day. One thing leads, I have to stay home for a few days with the money. When I decide to go back up, I noticed I was missing $200. Embarrassed I had lost it, I just decide to wait a few days for my check to come in and just use my paycheck to replenish it. The day that happens, my wallet goes missing. Once again I think I lost it. I look for a few days and can't find it. Humbly I ask my parents to loan me the amount to cover the cash that was in there so I could go pay rent. The day I decide to go pay rent rolls around. I go check my bank account while I'm at work and $400 are missing. I freak out. I call the bank and get the exact dates, times, and locations of the charges and cancel the card. I call the police and tell them what has happened, and they tell me to come down to file a report. MJ is working that day too, so I ask if he minds stopping by the police station on the way home, and he says it's okay. On the way down there he tells me that we need to talk about something. He tells me he's had a bad gambling problem and he got into some trouble with a bookie. He said he stole my card and the charges were him, but he didn't know where my wallet was. Then he tells me we should still go to the police station to report my license missing so I don't get in trouble. If I get pulled over, I lose it and start screaming at him. We go to the police station and I tell them he admitted to it and was out in the car. They arrest him on site. He's getting prosecuted by the state, but I'm not sure with what. He was also on probation at the time, so he's pretty faked. TLDR, lifelong close friend, next door neighbor, and confidant stole almost $1,000 from me to support a gambling problem. I deliver him and all the evidence to the police. My aunt got teenage pregnant and was forced to give the baby up for adoption. Years later, her son gets back in touch with our family through some nice detective work. He had a little information on our family, and he did things like have his own son fake a wrong number to our grandfather to see if he had a British accent because he knew he was an immigrant. My grandfather reintroduced the guy to his mother by asking, "Do you remember the nice young man from the community center who taught you how to use a computer?" Now, even that was a few years ago. More recently, this guy, my cousin, had been getting to know his bio dad. He isn't with my aunt, and they get to talking and realize they've both signed up at one point or other for some kind of study on genetics. They both have their DNA profiles and my cousin is interested, so he asks to see his dad's. After a while of looking at it, he's pretty convinced this guy isn't actually his dad, so he begins trying to subtly ask my sister questions on the subject. She has a master's in biology, but she eventually gets curious and requests more info. At this point he's convinced that the guy isn't his father and his mother lied to him, and he's just spent months getting to know the guy, so he's understandably upset and confronts her. She just ignores any of his questions, so he begs my mom, the only level-headed person in the family, to talk some sense into her. All my mom says is something along the lines of, "You're endangering your relationship with your son and you need to fix it." And my aunt flies into a tizzy about how her son got my mom involved and now won't speak to my mom. A bit while later, my mom and another one of her sisters are hanging out with the cousin's wife when she suddenly decided to vent about how much this is hurting her husband. Now another aunt knows, and she can't keep her mouth shut, so it quickly spreads to another aunt. Then, at a different cousin's wedding, she walks in on my mom and her mom talking about this, and they both clam up as soon as she walks in, so she asks what's going on. Her mother is a genius and says something along the lines of it's a matter between us of the older generation. Also Corinne's sister knows. Cue my cousin asking my sister to walk her to her car. Now the cousin knows. Now, after that above mentioned wedding, 2 more cousins confront their mother. Why did you never tell us that Corinne's brother was gay? I didn't realize it was a matter worth discussing. We also know about the paternity test. Shocked, my aunt begins talking about all the above mentioned drama, while my younger cousins were actually talking about the fact that another younger cousin, 16 years old, in fact, gave birth this year and tried to claim the father was Native American so he could get status, despite the fact that the kid was white as could be, and of course it turned out the native kid wasn't the father. This whole story came out to me after my mother complained that her sister was not talking to her, and when I asked why, she said, fuck it. Everyone else in the family knows. I might as well tell you. I had never really thought this level of drama was real. To top it all off, when my aunt was questioned about her story on who she claimed the father was, it turned out that dated 4 weeks meant less than 2 weeks and he ran away. As soon as he found out she was pregnant meant he was an American soldier who wasn't even in the country for more than a week and he never even knew she was pregnant. She was most likely pregnant before she even met him. Oh how I've longed to tell this story. Senior year of college. I needed one more bullshit class for my major. My options: social gerontology, the sociology of old people, or African American history. I ended up signing up for gerontology because I figured it would be easier and I didn't like history classes. Turns out it's a volunteer/work study class wherein you have to volunteer with old people who have dementia. Yeah, the crazy ones. I figured cool, not the biggest deal. Maybe the 3rd day or so, we get to sign up to volunteer with the crazies. I just wanted to get it over with, so I signed up the first few slots possible later that week. So later that week, it's my time to volunteer. I was a little nervous. It was at a church, no other students signed up for my day/time, and I was super tweaked out on coffee and cigarettes. So I show up at the church, walk around a bit, and finally find someone who works there. I tell them I'm here to volunteer for the college. They guide me to the main room. I walk into a room of about 10 old people, sitting around, drinking coffee, eating donuts, look just as demented and crazy as any old people. So I stand around, waiting for the supervisor, or whoever was supposed to tell me what to do. Some random old guy comes up to me and asks what I'm doing there. I tell him I'm volunteering with the school, there to hang out with you guys. He nods, walks off. 20 minutes or so later, and no supervisor shows up. I'm getting a little nervous. It's weird. Just me and the old crazies. The crazy old guy from before comes back up and asks what program I volunteer with. I tell him the name of the program, which has the word dementia in it. He gives me a wild look. Apparently, my program meets at another location on that particular day. So there I am, standing with a sane old man who knows I thought he was crazy. All the old people around him know too. Might not seem like a big deal, but when everyone thinks old people are crazy anyway, and you accuse them of being legit crazy, they don't take kindly to it. Awkward. So I hightailed it out of there, went straight to the library, and withdrew the fuck out of that class, went home and sorted some things out in my life. TLDR, embarrassed myself and a bunch of old people by accusing them of being insane. I used to work a crazy job doing inventory for retail and other various operations across the Midwest. Did a lot of traveling to and from various hotels, which included paid mileage, meal money, etc. This job had a turnover rate of like 85% due to the rigorous travel, long hours, etc. I worked there 12 years and must have met at least 5,000 different people. One of these people was a Vietnamese woman 9 years my senior. This chick was out there. She looked like a teenager, wasn't very bright, and had extremely broken English. She was a trip. One of my best friends hit it on the head when he said that she reminded him of a Mike Judge character, like Minimum from King of the Hill. Well, one day we were auditing a Kmart and were set to go to a hotel 200 miles away afterwards for a round of lows. I'm walking across the stockroom and this girl, we'll call her Tina, jumps out of an aisle and says to me, "Hey, we go to hotel tonight. I'm going to go swimming. You should swim with me." Alright, I thought, she wants me. No swimming was had that night, but I did hang out with her pretending to be interested in her mind and all that. This leads to a few weeks of her flirting with me strongly at work. She would come up to me and pull up her sleeve and show me where she wrote "I love Elvis," etc. So finally, I ask her if she wants to come to my place to watch a movie. Halfway through, I just said "fuck it," leaned over, kissed her, went up the shirt, banged her out, the whole 9 yards. This led to about 2 months of faking whenever we had the chance. Mostly on my couch and in hotel rooms on the job. A lot of my coworkers told me she was married, which was just an assumption, and I didn't really care as she lived 90 miles away, and I was young and stupid. I knew in my heart that it would never work out, because we just didn't connect on a non-sexual basis. We were two completely different people, but this didn't deter me from nailing it consistently. I was 21 years old and damn it, I had a fuck buddy. Well, around the end of month 2 of non-stop sex, she springs it on me, "You know, you should bring one of my cousins over." I was hit with all the clarity in the world. This girl was a prostitute of sorts, but she faked 4 green cards for her family, not money. She started banging a different dude when she knew I wasn't interested in marrying one of her Vietnamese cousins, then went on to bang the boss, which got both of them fired. TLDR, met a hot Vietnamese girl at work, faked her for a few months, found out she was a prostitute of sorts who lures men into marrying her family members to help them with the green card. It's gonna get lost, but hey ho. So, backstory, my family were living in a normal suburban house, living family comfortable suburban lives in London, UK, until one day in September 2001 Ahem, the company my dad's design studio was working for, were effectively obliterated. Long story short, we lost our home and ended up living with our grandparents. So after a good 5 or 6 years, we start to get back on our feet, get a bit of cash flow going again. I go off to university and we start to get some nice cars and nice birthday presents. Christmas is a bit more extravagant, etc., as my dad's got his business back off the ground and is starting to get a bit of wealth back. He even gets promoted to a Barclays Bank Gold member as his account is looking sufficiently fat. We start looking at some really nice houses to move into as well, and we finally settle on one and put the deposit down. But would you know it, someone gasumps us at the last minute and we can't move in there. It's okay, we find another place and do the same, but weirdly the same happens again, and then a third time. Then comes the day my grandmother opened the post. She accidentally opens my dad's bank statement. Everything was a lie. No business, no money, everything we have is on credit. Turns out he was keeping up the facade and stealing money from his mother, who, I defend him, but don't justify it. He cared for almost 24/7. So everything in my life, how I saw myself, my funding for uni, how I saw my family was effectively forcefully reset. Took a long time to recover from. So, yeah, not well written, but there you go. The strange bit was, I didn't hold it against him. We have a great relationship now, and he actually does have a bit of cash flow now. My mother is now the sole account holder, and he's become a much calmer, nicer person for it. Pretty much all is fixed, and I'm happy to live the way I do now. Comfortably, not well, but comfortably. I've never met my great-grandfather, but I grew up knowing he was in the military and died sometime before I was born and was a good man. A few years ago, I was drawing a picture of him for my great-grandma, since my family seems to appreciate my drawings, even though they aren't all that great, and I'm poor. While I was working on it at my grandma's house, she comes up and sees the reference photo I borrowed, which has the small note in the corner from my great-grandfather himself, signed and dated. She then explains the story surrounding the photo and the marriage of her parents and her birth. Basically, my great-grandmother began sleeping with the married mailman, got knocked up at 17. The mailman wasn't going to leave his wife for her, She met my great-grandfather at a repair shop she used to hang out at a lot when he returned from some other state to visit family while going through a divorce. Great-grandmother was sent to an unwed mother's home, kept sending and receiving letters from great-grandfather, and they got married shortly after she had my grandmother and had 2 more kids, moving to London and Georgia and back because of the military. Also, when she signed the marriage certificate, she changed the spelling of his last name. His signature made it look sort of like it was spelled with a double S, but she was the only one in the family to use 2, and my great-grandmother is too proud to admit fault. Ever. Unless you have undeniable proof and rub he knows in it, and she can use how you've treated her to gossip or hold over your head later claiming she's done you no wrong. I had always noticed the handwriting on the photo looked familiar, but I assumed it was because I grew up seeing the photo. Turns out, she signed the photo and dated it before they had even met to cover up that she had premarital sex with a married man. To this day she denies it, and if you bring it up, she will drive you into the ground with insults, along with the family members who let out her little secret to my grandma about 15 or so years ago. My grandma wasn't too surprised, but looked into it and found their marriage certificate, which has their marriage dates after her birth, and even tracked down some of her biological father's family. She also says my grandmother's younger sister was in a fire when she was 8, causing her brain to stop developing. I believe there was a fire, but she has no scarring, even though it was her dress that caught fire, and a family friend who was in a fire around the same age has scarring. I could very well be wrong, but I still have my doubts, and feel like they may have used the fire to cover up having a mentally challenged child. And I think they've overplayed the damage so much that most of her handicap is because of them babying and making excuses for everything she does. Maybe I just have trouble believing anything my great-grandma says now. She once tried to tell me she literally meant raw fish, and she knew this because they went to Hawaii, and that male bears can give birth, according to some PBS show that she couldn't remember any real identifying details about. Close to a decade ago now I experienced the most bizarre form of identity theft I've heard of. It all started on MySpace, back when it was actually used. I had an account and used it sparingly, but I still had lots of photos up on it. One evening I got this odd message from a complete stranger accusing me of being a horrible liar. It seemed like the person had me mixed up with somebody else, so I just sent off a "sorry, I think you have the wrong account" message, and thought nothing more of it. The next morning I got a call from a 662 area code phone. I picked it up and came to learn it's from the stranger on MySpace. The guy went by Mickey, was calm, collected, and very polite. Given the area code was from Tupelo, I will henceforth be addressing him by the nickname I gave him then, Mississippi Mickey. He then began to tell me the strangest story I've ever heard about identity theft. Basically, someone had been posing as me via LiveJournal for around a year and had been romancing Mississippi Mickey the entire time. Mickey had had a family member going through Alzheimer's, and my imposter had reflected the story back at him, claiming to have a grandmother going through this. He was kind, apparently, and helped Mickey through some emotionally trying experiences. To keep the identity theft as convincing as possible, he was using photos of me from MySpace and videos of me performing with bands in the city I lived in, and doing things like playing basketball in the park. Upon hearing this I was pretty freaked out, as I couldn't remember an instance where I was ever filmed at a show or while playing basketball. The photos were clearly from my MySpace account, but the videos made me think stalker. Mississippi Mickey went on to explain that he had discovered my MySpace page the day before and recognized something was clearly not right. Initially he assumed I was the same person from the LiveJournal and called me out on MySpace. I believe he also called out the person on LiveJournal, but I think the guy just cancelled the account, so all Mickey got in reply was a disappearance. Well, that left just MySpace, and after my confusing reply, he spent the night thinking about it and somehow located my cell phone number in order to contact the real me. I still have no idea how he got it. It was unlisted, and I never put it online. He finished his story and I apologized, feeling strangely responsible for making my identity so easy to steal. I know it's ridiculous, but this guy seemed to have a pretty good idea of who I really was, and seemed to be looking for some form of emotional release. It was the least I could do. We then talked a bit about who it could have been. He knew the names of most of my real friends, which was also unsettling, so we were able to discuss them all at some length, while trying to decipher who the culprit might be. Basically we were looking for a group pattern where the imposter me seemed more familiar with a particular group of people than the actual me was, thus pointing us towards the crowd he came from. We didn't get anywhere, but fast forward a few months, and I got another call from Mississippi Mickey. I'd stayed in touch with him via MySpace, because he was a nice enough guy and I figured we were both victims in the identity theft. He was heading into my city, hundreds of miles from Tupelo, with a friend, so she could visit family or something like that, and he wanted to see me and talk a bit more about the identity theft. I was living with my parents at the time, and he and his friend stopped by and chatted with me for a while. We got nowhere really, but a few names surfaced which seemed a bit suspicious. I knew the scene these two names hung out in, and it happened that there was a basement show going on that night that they might be going to. I invited Mickey and his friend to it. I took along a friend later that night, both for safety and because the bizarreness of the whole affair seemed to warrant witnesses. We went to the show, and I got distracted and started talking to some old friends. At some point I stepped outside, rather drunk at that point, and saw Mickey in a heated discussion with the two girls we had been hoping to find there. One of them was in tears. Apparently she knew all about the liver journal proceedings. She had known all along in fact. Mickey was out for names. Who was it and why? But she wouldn't give in. She said the guy was emotionally unbalanced and living in another city, and that I probably didn't even know him. My what the fuck-o-meter was off the charts. I had known this girl for years, still do in fact, and she had knowingly let some random guy lead someone on as me for a year. It was all a big laugh for them, watching their faked up friend mess with the emotions of a complete stranger. Even now it's difficult for me to process. We didn't get any further, as she ended up excusing herself from the show. We all left after that, a little confused, and a little relieved, that some sort of conclusion had been reached. I bid farewell to Mississippi Mickey at his hotel that night, and never saw him again, though we spoke occasionally on MySpace. Eventually I left MySpace, and I haven't heard from him since. I actually now steer clear of social networking. I tried Facebook for a while, but eventually I got worried about another repeat, and stopped using my account entirely. The plot twist here is that Mickey and I actually had a lot in common. Both gay, well, B in my case, but you get the idea, both from fundamentalist Christian backgrounds with pastors for parents, and we had similar senses of humor and taste in music. He was also hot as blazes. He invited me to hang out at his hotel the night before he left, and whenever I think about it, I regret not doing so. I really have no idea what my reservations were at the time. So that's the plot twist I guess. Identity theft into epic missed opportunity at romance. TLDR, some asshole stole my identity and led someone on for around a year on LiverJournal. Eventually the victim, a hot southern stud named Mississippi Mickey, found my real MySpace, called me up, came to visit, beached out the friends of the asshole, and we hit it off but never even made out. The plot twist is that the asshole who pretended to be me was actually an excellent matchmaker. Nicholas Sparks would have had a gay field day with this one. Edit. Words are hard. I was a part of a wedding back in 09. My good friend, let's call him Greg, was marrying his girlfriend of a few years. She's a super smart and awesome girl and we were all real happy for them. I was asked to be a groomsman, and was very honored to be a part of it. In the months leading up to the wedding, I had heard very little about my responsibilities as a groomsman. There was no talk of a bachelor party, and I had no idea what we were doing about our suits. I figured Greg had everything under control, and he told me as much when I would text him occasionally to find out. The week of the wedding, I had to travel to get to where the wedding was, and still heard nothing about the suit. Was I to get it in Brooklyn where I lived, or pick it up where the wedding is in Boston? Keep in mind I hadn't been fitted for this thing yet. He said not to worry, and that we would work it out at the rehearsal dinner. I get to the rehearsal dinner and immediately I ask Greg what's up with the suits. He and the best man pull me aside. There are no suits, because I don't know if tomorrow is happening. I look at the best man and he just nods his head disapprovingly. Greg tells me he's been getting cold feet and is planning to break it off after the rehearsal dinner and didn't want us to spend money on suits we wouldn't use. I was blown away. I mean, fine, if you don't think it'll work then I guess it's better to break it off before tying the knot, but goddamn. The dinner was pretty awkward from then on out. The bridal party was having an amazing time and the groomsmen and I are just sitting there knocking back beers knowing that everything is doomed. I left the dinner with a promise that I would be texted if the wedding was on or off. The next day, wedding day, I woke up anticipating a last-minute wedding is on text. No such luck. A few hours went by before the best man confirmed that the wedding was indeed off. About an hour before the ceremony was due to begin I got another text from the bride. Where are you guys? Fuck. I texted the best man and he got the same text. We didn't know what to do, so we ignored it. Greg was completely unreachable, so we had no idea what was going on. So now we are both thinking that Greg is standing up his fiancée at the altar. What the fuck? We were horrified by the whole thing and felt pretty miserable. Respect for Greg plunged through the floor. Around the time the ceremony was supposed to go on, my aunt was hanging out with my mom and I was giving her the entire story. She asked to see a picture of the bride, so I pulled up her Facebook page. A new picture of her was posted 2 minutes earlier. A picture of her and Greg, married. He went through with the faking wedding without his groomsmen. I called the best man and told him to check out Facebook. He was completely flabbergasted. What did Greg say to who was now his wife? What did everyone say about the fact that there were no groomsmen? According to a mutual friend at the wedding, Greg made it seem like we all stood him up in protest of the wedding, making us all look like assholes. Seriously. I spoke to Greg a few months later, and his grand plan was to separate his friend life from his married life, so that we wouldn't become entangled in the divorce that would ultimately come from this sham marriage. I haven't talked to him in a while, but I think they are still married. TLDR, friend told his groomsman that he called off his wedding, went through with it without us anyway. Mine is sort of the opposite side of the twist. When I twisted someone else. My Reddit Secret Santa assignment this year was this guy who lives in LA. Irony already. I'm moving to LA on January 11th to further my writing career. So I look him up and de-stalk him a little. Add him to Facebook because his Reddit profile has some info, but not a lot. I find this show he is in. Oh, okay, he is an actor also. I watch the show and I like it. It's a pretty funny little web series. So when he finally adds me back, I message him and ask if I can call him on the phone and pick his brain a little under the guise that I'm a writer and moving to LA soon and I like his show and just sort of want to talk to someone in the bees. All true. I just leave out the Secret Santa part. So he calls the next day and I realize quickly that I'm not getting much out of him. He is really sticking to info about the show. Then I slip up and ask about something he posted on Reddit, not on Facebook. He has Bell's palsy. The conversation goes like this from there. Him, how the fuck do you know that? Me, oh, I read it somewhere. Him, it's not on Facebook. Where did you read it? Me, I don't remember. Yeah, no idea. Yeah. Haha. Anyway, who would you say some of your inspirations are? Him, am I being recorded? Is this something official or something? If you are recording me or taking this info down or something, you should really tell me. Me, no, not at all. Him, me, okay, sheet look, I might have a little ulterior motive for calling you. Him, okay, what is the ulterior motive? Me, well there might be this website and I might be trying to dig at you for information on a present to mail to you. But I swear everything I told you is true. I'm moving to LA, and I'm a writer, and I do like your show. From there, we ended up talking for several hours, and it turns out that he is sort of the male version of myself. I know exactly what to get him for his present, and I also made a friend for when I move down to LA. We plan on hanging out and playing Cards Against Humanity. He is going to read some of my scripts, and I'm going to introduce him to some people I know who also have some shows. Awesome. This happened years ago at work. I was much younger then. A guy, let's call him Jim, was always flirty with me. I found out he was engaged to a girl, let's call her Beth, in my department. Beth was a well-known fiery beach that no one particularly cared for. Her fiance, Jim, would flirt with me constantly. I told him off several times, telling him I just wasn't interested. Many people in our department despised Beth and knew that Jim was after me. So they decided to take up a collection without me knowing anything about it and sent Jim flowers. I came into work and seen the flowers and smelled them and commented on how pretty they were. I went back to work as usual and didn't think anything more about it. The next week, Jim gets more flowers. The next week even more. Each time the flowers were signed an anonymous admirer. It started to get rumored that I was the one sending the flowers. Beth came over to me and beached me out several times accusing me of trying to steal her man. I had nothing to do with him or the flowers being sent. I got called into the hours and was being accused of sending flowers. Of course I denied it. They didn't believe me. I was very close to losing my job over this. Finally I told Hours, why not return the flowers and ask for a number to refund the money. They contacted the flower company and explained the situation. The florist agreed to cooperate. The next week, when flowers were sent, I just waited, knowing that it would all end soon, and Beth would finally learn the truth and quit beaching me out. Come to find out, there was a group of people that were sending the flowers and donating money to pay for it. And it just happened to be that week it was Carl's turn to send the flowers. The florist had the name and gave it to Hours. Cole was fired the next day for sexual harassment. The next day Beth apologized to me. Nothing ever happened to the rest of the people involved other than Beth apologizing to me. The company offered no apology at all. TLDR, caught in a weird flower-giving non-existent love triangle that almost cost me my job and definitely losing the respect of my co-workers. I broke my leg when I was about 8 years old. I distinctly remember how it happened, and it became my favorite I was a retard when I was a kid stories. All of my friends knew this story. I would tell people about how Batman was my favorite superhero as a kid, and I always wanted to be him. Jokes on me, we were poor, and I would collect all of the Batman action figures, had a Batman watch, etc. And when I was a kid, we used to have this dog named Lavender. Lavender was an old, affectionate black lab, and I could always picture this house we had for her. It was large and made of plastic, but it looked like a log cabin. I called it the fake log cabin for as long as I can remember. So, when I was 9, I was retarded enough to climb on top of the cabin, spread my little cape, yell, "I will save you," got him and jump off of the fake log cabin, which I can picture now as being around 4.5-5 tall. I landed on the ground and heard a resounding crack as pain jolted through my leg and I collapsed on the ground. I dragged myself into the living room, bawling my eyes out. When I was 18, my mom and I were having an argument about my older brother, who was distanced from the family at the time, and still is. She kept telling me about how he treated me like shit when we lived in the same house, and I kept telling her that it wasn't true. Then she said, "Oh yeah. He was such a good older brother that he broke your leg." What? I could easily see it in my head. That wasn't what happened. I saw it. He pushed you off of the couch and you broke your leg. He tried to lie and say that you jumped. So my entire life, I completely believed in a manufactured memory. All of the details were there and I can still see perfectly in my head. It was all completely fabricated. We didn't even have the fake log cabin at the time, and even when we did, it wasn't remotely that tall. That was one of the more distinct what the fuck moments in my entire life. This is one of those things you would think could only happen in a movie, but it actually happened to me when I was 19. Quite possibly the most awesome thing ever. Here it goes. I met this girl, Erica, my sophomore year of college. She was about 5'10", had long strawberry hair and big green eyes. Basically one of the most beautiful girls I had ever seen. I was instantly putty in her hands. We spent basically all day every day together. Just about the only time we weren't together was when one of us had a class the other didn't have, but we shared the same major, so we actually had a couple classes together as well. One afternoon we were talking about our families and she mentioned that her sister, who I had neither met nor knew about, had seen pictures of me and wanted to meet me because she thought I was cute, and apparently Erica had told her all about me and thought we would be perfect for each other. I was heartbroken. I was all about this girl, spent every waking moment with her for 2 weeks, and here she was, pawning me off on her sister. Though I was upset, I agreed to meet her sister out of curiosity and me not wanting to hurt anyone's feelings. So it was arranged for me to go over to their shared apartment after one of my classes. A little backstory, we had only been hanging out for a couple weeks, and I had only been to her house once for about 5 minutes. I never even went inside. I was waiting in the car for her to grab something from inside and we left. At the time, I had no idea she had a roommate or a sister, or that they were one and the same. Back to the story. I get out of class and head over to Erica's. I knock on the door, and she opens it, and she looks beautiful. Her hair is in big curls, her makeup is done, and she is wearing one of those sundresses that makes us southern boys drool. She takes 2 steps forward, grabs me and kisses me, brings me inside, closes the door, and before I can say anything else, she's kissing me again and pushing me into her room. She proceeds to absolutely lay it on me. After we finish, and I catch my breath, I roll over and say, "Oh my god, Erica, that was amazing. I'm so happy you changed your mind about us. I'm sure your sister is nice, but I've been crazy about you since the first time we spoke. What changed your mind?" She looks at me, smiles and says, "Hi, I'm Jonah, Erica's identical twin sister, and I was right about you. You are amazing." Erica came home about an hour later and asked if I liked my surprise. I was a little freaked out, but it turns out they were identical in every way, not just looks. I dated the sister for a while, but even after we broke up, we all stayed good friend. Still are to this day over 10 years later. TLDR, I met a beautiful, amazing girl and immediately fell for her. She pawned me off on her sister and broke my heart. Showed up at her house to begrudgingly meet her sister. Original girl rides me like Seabiscuit. Turns out it is not original girl but her twin sister. Original twin is pleased. We all become close. Have been ever since. I met this guy on a MMORPG. We became pretty good friends and even made plans to meet up IRL sometime, although we never actually did. His life was pretty shitty. His mum had died in a car accident when he was young. His sister had moved to Spain with her boyfriend, and his father had abused him to the point where the guy had to leave the house and live with his uncle. I was basically counseling him a lot, and his life seemed to be getting better. He was in a band that made pretty good music, which I downloaded and listened to quite often, admiring his talent. We were incredibly close friends for 2 years, and I even saved his life on one occasion when he was feeling really depressed. Then one day, when I was looking around on Facebook, I found the page of a guy who looked a lot like him. That was weird. He turned out to be in the band that my friend had said he was in, except that it turned out he wasn't. I confronted him as soon as he came online, and at first he denied it, saying that he had another Facebook account with his middle name and his dad's last name, his first name and his mum's last name. I called bullshit. In the end he confessed that he was, indeed, not in the band, and that the guy was actually a popular kid at his school, who he was jealous of, but who looked like him, so he'd faked being him. But I started to question more, and through Facebook I found out that his mum was still alive. He told me that that was actually his stepmom who happened to have the same name as his real mum. Yeah, right. He never actually admitted these things, but I stopped talking to him. In the end it turned out that everything had been a lie. He'd just been a jealous little kid who'd wanted sympathy. His family was still alive and together, and he was not depressed at all. TLDR. 2-year online friend turns out to have faked his entire depressing life for sympathy. Hey guys, I have a story. A real goddamn story. So earlier this year I went to a convention in Baltimore. It was a great time, and as a newly single guy I was really ready to get out and enjoy myself. I stay at my brother's girlfriend's house, and it's there that I meet her roommates. Her name is Lynn. One is a pretty awesome dude. He used to be the jockey's jock who'd ever jocked before a degenerative disease started rapidly turning his muscle into fat. For this story we'll call him Jack. More on him later. The other, a seriously cute Asian girl we'll call May. Me, being newly single, told Lynn I'd go after her if she didn't mind me flirting with her roommate in her house. But she told me May didn't really speak English, and on top of that was very shy. Like stayed in her room shy, unless she went to her waitress job. Between the three of them, each owns a portion of the house. 2 upstairs, Lynn and May, and Jack is in the basement. He's got his own exit. It's a pretty sweet setup. 3 months later, Solon is telling us his story about how May would always pay rent in bills, 20s, 10s, 50s so on. This is why she assumed she was a waitress, but never actually asked what she did. But that day Jack found out. He was sitting at home, alone, after class, still being in the party/screw mindset that he grew up with before his disease took hold of him. Jack decided to leave the house to get some of the free condoms his school offered. As he was leaving he saw several police cars enter the neighborhood. This is Baltimore though, that's practically a parade. As he comes back, Jack enters through the basement and tries to chill out, eager for the night's festivities. It's then that he hears loud footsteps above him. May and Lynn probably have 180 pounds between the both of them. They're tiny. There I know way too tiny girls could make those noises. So Jack, being a big guy, raises to his feet, tries his best to look as intimidating as possible, and comes face to face with the intruder entering his home, who happens to be a member of Baltimore's finest. The officer immediately asks Jack to get against the wall, searches him, and finds the condoms. Jack, super confused, asks what the hell is going on. The officer says something along the lines of "I bet you're one of her clients," and informs Jack that he's under suspicion of being a John. It turns out Lynn isn't actually a waitress, she really runs a massage parlor. When the officer opens the door to Lynn's room they find boxes of condoms. Not those little packs you get at the store, these things have 5,000 units apiece in them. They also find gallons of lube and 10 grand in her car. Also, to my knowledge she's still on the run, and she apparently had done this before. TLDR, that quiet Asian girl you know, could actually be a prostitute. His school was easily within 5-minute walking distance, and coming back into his home. Back in the days of yore, when Omegle was populated with more than just trolls, and kids desperate for suburbs, I got in a conversation with this girl. She was by far the most interesting person I'd met on there so far, so we exchanged screen names, and got to talking. When we saw each other online, we told each other all about our lives, and became pretty good friends. We played games together on some site a couple times, and always had great conversations. She was absolutely brilliant, a year younger than me, but a year ahead of me in school, and was on the fast track to Princeton, or something. Thing was, her parents were incredibly overbearing. She wasn't allowed to have friends at school and her parents made her do huge reports on different things, totally independent of school. I tried to get her to be her own person, work hard but not be so controlled by her parents. It ended up in arguments a few times as she defended her parents, saying, truly, that it was just because they loved her. I mean, she'd never known any other life, but I just couldn't accept that she wasn't allowed to even have friends. Suddenly she was rarely online anymore, for a few months, and when she didn't respond to my messages. I think one of our last conversations ended up in an argument, and I thought that I had pushed too hard and screwed up our friendship. Then one day I got a response. It was her mom. Apparently my friend was dead and the brief occurrences of her being online were from AIM automatically signing in when the computer was used. She didn't want to talk about it, but I inferred from the little she said that my friend had been out for a run and trusted a stranger too much. It seems that she'd been murdered. To this day I honestly don't know if it all happened or if it was some troll using death as a means to end his months-long prank on me. It could well have been, as parts of her life story seemed far-fetched, yet possible. I don't know if I'd rather have it be real or fake. I think real, though, better to live, and die suddenly than never to have existed at all, I guess. But if you were real, Anika, you are missed. So my mom and dad never marry, and he has me come over on weekends. Not a big deal. We have fun. I love him. And weekends and his Jamaican roommates making jerk chicken and curry goat and stuff is just a normal part of life for me. Relations between the two of them were very strained though, due to being exes and consigning loans and defaulting. Mom signed for dad. I was cool with everyone though. My mom was working a temp job for some banking firm, or whatever in the World Trade Center, and the day that it was blown up the first time, 93 sometime, by the truck bomber guy, she was out with some girlfriends for lunch, and had just happened to leave early. That was the straw, and because of that my mom decided to move out of New York City out to El Segundo, California to get away from the crazy of the city. Now we are in SoCal, and I'm up late one night watching something on MTV, maybe Liquid Television, and we get hit by the Northridge earthquake in '94. We left the crazy in New York City for the crazy in SoCal. When I moved to Cali, I completely lost touch with my dad. 99% my fault. Up until a couple of years ago I had issues with keeping in touch and some other weird things. I was 13 when we moved, so from 1993 on I hadn't seen or heard from my dad. Until one night, my buddy Dennis comes over to my house. It was super strange, because it was a school night, and like 11:30 p.m. I'm up still playing FFVII, and I hear a knock on the door. People talking, then my mom almost hysterical saying oh my god, Dennis what's wrong? Over and over. Dennis' mom had her own issues, so I thought he just decided to leave her place and sleep over for a while. No big deal. I come around the corner and I hear him say I really need to talk to Brat, and when I see the look on his face I know it was some seriously heavy shit. He goes on to explain that my father had just been found in his apartment, dead. My aunt had gone through his paperwork at his place looking for my number, because she knew he had hired a private investigator to find me. The number she found was Dennis' home phone number, which was my old phone number from the first apartment we had when my mom and I first moved out to El Segundo. My dad had my old phone number and was just waiting for the perfect time in his life to contact me. Instead he passed away, heartbroken. The positive thing coming out of this is that I reconnected with his side of the family, which is very good considering I have a daughter and I want them to know each other. I know this doesn't really have any plot twists, but there were some other missing dad stories, and this was kind of cleansing. Well, I've handcrafted a plot twist that totally left this guy speechless when he was in the spotlight. Alright, well, this one's from high school. I took pre-law, which is basically intro to law. Our exam was a mock trial. I'd goofed around in class a lot and really didn't pay much attention. So when the teacher made the groups, instead of assigning me as prosecuting/defense lawyer, he made me play a key witness, a junkie off the streets. Little did my teacher know I was interested in acting post-secondary. So I said okay, this should be cake. Morning of the trial, I come early to practice answering all the questions that the defense has ready. Meanwhile, right across the hallway on the prosecuting team, this one douchebag kept bragging about how prepared he is and how he's going to kick ours, etc, etc. I didn't really care for my mark, but for some reason I felt like I needed to bring this guy down a notch. So when my team wasn't looking, I approached the douchebag and I told him, "Hey douchebag, you want to win this case? All you need to do is ask me one question. Are you currently high or intoxicated? And I'll say yes, since I'm their key witness. The rest of your job is easy." He smirks and accepts, not even questioning why I would betray my team. I'm on the stand. He goes through a bunch of preliminary questions, such as where I was during the incident, etc. And then finally, he pops the question, "Are you currently intoxicated or high?" Plot twist, and that's when I went berserk. I denied it and acted like I was offended and so on. After I finished, the kid just stood there dumbfounded. He was so awestruck that he didn't even finish the rest of his questions and just took his seat. Anyways, we won the case. I passed the court. Justice has been served. Motherfuckers. At my first salary job, I volunteered for the night/graveyard shift. I had a history of being anywhere from 5 to 15 minutes late when I was on the day shift, but when I started working nights, I was significantly better at being on time. Two guys from the day shift never liked me. One was my supervisor and one was a peer. The supervisor had the early morning shift, coming in an hour before anyone else, but my shift ended a few hours before his started. The start of my night shift would sometimes overlap the end of the peer's shift if he was working late. One day, my manager, one of the company VPs, called me into her office to tell me that I was off the night shift due to tardiness, effective immediately. I was shocked because there were no warnings and because I had been considerably better at arriving on time. I asked how they came to that conclusion and was told that there had been complaints. It took me a minute or so to recover from the initial shock and disappointment. I really liked this shift. Then I had a epiphany. We don't have a time card to prove my attendance, but they can check my access card for the doors and see approximately when I arrive. This is where the plot twist comes in. My supervisor was the person that had informed my manager of the complaints, and my manager had taken his word for it. Turns out, the supervisor, early morning shift, was consistently showing up an average of 15 minutes late, and I was showing up an average of 5 minutes early. The supervisor was confronted with this information by my manager. He quickly told her that my peer was the one who told him of the complaints. The peer was asked about the complaints and said that customers had complained to him about my attendance, but he refused to name any customers to back his claim. Anyone that knows a supervisor and peer would tell you that one or both of them had done this with the intent of getting me in trouble. They expected my poor daytime history to be enough to convict me. Neither the supervisor nor the peer got in trouble for the event. Less than a year later I was hired on by one of our customers for about 50% more than I was making at the job described in this story. TL/DR. Two coworkers tried to get me fired for tardiness. One turned out to be late far more often than I.